The sheriff buried his daughter 3 years ago, so when she walked back into town, alive and silent, folks started locking their doors. It was near dusk when she appeared, hair tangled, eyes vacant, boots caked in red clay. Emily. Taylor, daughter of Sheriff Amos, had vanished 3 years prior without a trace. After months of searching, they'd found a shredded bonnet near Dry Creek and blood soaked into the soil. A closed casket funeral was held. The town mourned. Sheriff. Amos aged 10 years and one, but now she was here. She didn't speak, didn't smile. She simply walked down Stillwater's main street in the same pale blue dress she'd last been seen in. Only now it hung from her like a ghost's shroud, dirtied and torn. People stared from their windows, murmuring prayers. Dogs whimpered. Children were pulled inside by trembling hands. Sheriff Amos stepped out of his office, stunned into silence. His hands shook as he reached out toward her. Emily? She walked past him, up the chapel steps, and vanished inside the church that had burned the night of her funeral. The door groaned shut behind her. No one followed. That night, Stillwater didn't sleep. Word spread like wildfire across the plains. The sheriff's dead daughter had returned. Some called it a miracle. Others whispered of witchcraft. But none dared speak too loud, as if saying her name might summon something they didn't understand. 50 miles south, another man heard. The tale before the dust of it reached town. Jake Holloway sat alone by a crackling fire, sharpening a blade with slow, deliberate strokes. He hadn't been seen in Stillwater in nearly a decade, not since his name had been etched into every wanted poster west of the Missouri. Murder, robbery, arson. They called him an outlaw, a devil with a Winchester. But Jake had once known Emily Taylor. And now he was staring at a poster with her name on it, printed not as a missing person but as a fugitive, wanted, dead or alive. His scar itched. 3 years dead, and now she's a target, he muttered. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. He folded the poster, tucked it inside his coat, and kicked dirt onto the fire. His horse, Midnight, neighed low as Jake mounted up. "Looks like we're going home, boy," he said. Back in Stillwater, the church bell rang once, loud and hollow, though no rope had been pulled. The wind carried the sound straight through. Sheriff Amos's bones, and somewhere deep in the woods behind the town, something watched and waited. The church hadn't seen a soul in years. After the fire that gutted its walls and blackened its altar, folks said it was cursed. The new preacher refused to step inside, and when wind passed through its broken windows, it sounded like someone whispering from the pews. Now Emily Taylor sat there, alone, on the same pew where her funeral was held. The candles were gone. The hymn books, scorched and curled. A layer of ash still clung to the edges of the pulpit, like the town had frozen time after her death. She stared at the empty altar, motionless, expressionless. Outside, Sheriff Amos stood in the street, torn between duty and dread. He hadn't walked into that church since the night they closed her casket. His boots felt heavier than they had during any manhunt. Every step toward the chapel was like walking into a nightmare. He reached for the doorknob. Stopped. Something shifted inside. A thump. Then, a voice, faint, a girl's voice, whispering, not praying, speaking, but no one else had gone in. "Emily?" he called through the cracked wood. No answer. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the pews were empty, except for her. She was still seated, facing forward. Only now her hand clutched something, a blackened locket, melted on one edge, the same locket she was buried with. His late wife's. Amos's breath caught in his throat. He had buried that with her. Hadn't. He stepped closer. She slowly turned her head, and for the first time since her return, her lips parted. "Don't let him find me," she whispered. Amos froze. "Who?" She looked behind him. eyes wide. He's coming. 30 miles out, Jake. Holloway galloped hard through the night, his coat whipped behind him like the wings of some avenging spirit. The moon lit the plains in a cold silver glow as he crossed Red Creek and pushed toward Stillwater. He wasn't coming to finish old business. He was coming because he had seen something no lawman would believe. 3 nights ago, in a ghost town east of Dust Hollow, he had found an entire gang, men he once rode with, gutted like hogs. Their bodies had been burned in a ring, and at the center of that ring, a name had been scratched into the dirt in blood: Emily Taylor. He didn't know how she survived, or what she had become. But Jake had made a promise once, long ago, to protect her, even from herself. In the woods behind the Stillwater church, a figure crouched low, watching through a crack in the wall. His breath rattled, eyes gleamed red in the moonlight, and in his palm he held something that pulsed like it was alive. A silver ring engraved with an E and scorched black from fire. The next morning, the sun barely peeked over the hills. It was the kind of day that felt like it hadn't quite decided if it wanted to be light or dark. Sheriff Amos Taylor stood by the church, eyes fixed on the door. He hadn't moved since Emily spoke those words. "Don't let him find me." But who was she talking about? Who could scare Emily like that? He pushed open the door, his boots creaking on the wooden floor. Emily was still sitting in the same place, staring at the altar. The locket was gone now. Just an empty hand resting on her lap. "Emily?" Amos's voice trembled. No answer. But something else was wrong. The air felt heavier, like the walls of the church had absorbed all the grief and secrets of the past, and now they were pressing back in. He stepped closer. The closer he got, the more he could feel it, the weight of something dark, hidden in the shadows of that place. His hand hovered over her shoulder. He didn't know what to say, what to do. "Who is coming for you, Emily?" he finally whispered. She slowly turned her head. Her eyes locked onto his. There was no warmth, no recognition, just cold, empty stare. "The one who never left," she murmured. Before Amos could say anything more, the church bell rang again, but this time the sound was different. It wasn't just a ring. It was like a call, a warning. It echoed through the town, rattling every bone in Amos's body. He ran out the door, panic rising in his chest, and there, just outside the church, he saw it, a figure on horseback, shrouded in shadows. Standing still like he was waiting. The wind kicked up, and for a split second, the figure was gone, disappeared into thin air. And yet Amos knew he wasn't imagining it. He wasn't that kind of man. He'd seen too much. Felt too much. It was real. But why didn't anyone else see him? How could a man just vanish like that? 50 miles away, Jake Holloway's horse finally came to a stop at the edge of Stillwater. He pulled down his hat, his eyes scanning the town. Everything looked the same. But nothing felt the same. He could feel it in his gut. Something was wrong. He dismounted, tethering his horse to the post outside the saloon. The usual crowd of gamblers and drunks were inside, but the air was still. Too still. He pushed open the door. The familiar scent of whiskey and sweat hit him, but it didn't settle right. There, sitting at the bar, was the same bartender who'd been here when Jake was last in town. The man looked up and froze. His hands gripped the glass tighter, knuckles turning white. Jake wasn't sure what made him do it, but he walked straight over, sat down, and ordered a drink. "Got a feeling you're expecting someone," Jake said quietly, looking the bartender dead in the eye. The bartender swallowed hard, then nodded. "You're not wrong. They're talking about her. The girl. Emily." Jake's jaw tightened. "What are they saying?" "They saying she ain't..." "Right. Ain't the same. Girl, she came back from the dead, they say. Some say she's a spirit, others think she's something worse. But everyone's afraid of her. And the sheriff, He won't talk. Just keeps to himself. Jake slammed his drink down. The glass shattered. Where is she? He growled. Back. At the church. Emily stood now, her hands trembling. Something was happening. Something she didn't understand. Her father had always kept her safe. He had always been there. But now she didn't know if he could protect her from this. She closed her eyes, remembering the night of the fire, remembering the man in the shadows, remembering the promise. He's still out there. Jake Holloway didn't waste time. He walked, straight from the saloon to the sheriff's office, pushing open the door like he still owned the town. Sheriff Amos looked up from his desk, hand inching toward his revolver, until his eyes met Jake's. 10 long years had passed, but neither of them forgot. You got a lot of nerve coming back here, Amos said, voice cold as iron. Jake didn't flinch. Your daughter's alive. That's all the nerve I need. Amos stood slowly. If you've come to stir up more dust, I suggest you turn right back around. I didn't ride 100 miles to turn around, Jake snapped. You buried a girl who ain't dead, and now there's folks whispering like the devil himself walked into town. Amos narrowed his eyes. You think I don't know something's wrong? You think I sleep at night? Jake stepped forward. Then help me. Tell me what happened that night. The truth. For a long moment, Amos just stared at him. Then he slowly sat back down. She was with me, he said quietly. The night the church burned, we got into an argument. She ran off. I found her an hour later down by the creek, unconscious, bleeding. I thought she was gone. Jake stayed silent. I couldn't handle it. We held the funeral, closed casket. I couldn't even look. But she wasn't dead, Jake said, voice tight. Amos looked away. I didn't know. Not really. Until now. Jake pulled something from his coat, the old wanted poster with Emily's name scrawled across it. Then explain this. Amos froze. Where did you get that? Doesn't matter. What matters is that someone out there wants her hunted, not just found. Hunted. Amos stared at the poster. His face went pale. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, It's him. He's back. Jake leaned in. Who? Amos looked up. The preacher, the one who built that church. His real name wasn't Samuel. It was Elijah Black. Jake blinked. That name, it rang too loud in his head. He was obsessed with her. Said she had the mark of the fireborn. Said she was chosen. I kicked him out of town a month before the fire, but I think he never left. Meanwhile, in the old church, Emily was shaking. She'd pulled her sleeve up to look at the scar on her forearm. A strange spiral mark, burned into her skin like it had been branded. She didn't remember getting it. Didn't remember anything from that night. But the mark burned now, like it knew he was near. Outside the chapel, a whispering wind curled through the graveyard, and standing between two tilted headstones was a man in black, eyes like coals, hands folded in prayer, and a grin that didn't belong on any preacher's face. Emily didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. The mark on her arm throbbed like it had a heartbeat of its own. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flames, licking the walls of the church, climbing the wooden beams, and his face, standing at the altar, smiling as everything burned. She shot up in bed, sweat on her brow, and there, at the foot of the room, stood her father, Sheriff Amos. He looked tired, older than he did yesterday, like the truth was aging him by the hour. I remember now, Emily said softly. Amos didn't speak. I saw him that night. I was hiding under the altar. He didn't know I was there. He lit the match himself. He wanted the church to burn. Amos stepped closer. What else did you see? Emily hesitated. He was talking to someone, but there was no one else there. A pause. Then she added, or maybe something I couldn't see. Amos's jaw tightened. You don't have to remember it all, sweetheart. Yes, I do, she said firmly, because he's not gone. Across town, Jake Holloway stood at the preacher's old cabin. It had been abandoned for years, or so they thought. The windows were boarded, door chained from the inside. But the lock was fresh, recently oiled. Jake didn't knock. He kicked the door in with one hard boot. Inside, the air was thick with incense and rot. The walls were covered in ash drawings, strange symbols, circles with eyes, flames licking up from handprints. In the center of the room was a book, old, wrapped in burned leather. Jake opened it. His hands stopped on a page marked with Emily's name, written over and over, across symbols he couldn't understand. Then a sound behind him, a whisper, not in words, just pressure. He spun, hand on his gun, but no one was there. Still, the temperature dropped. Breath misted in the air, and in the mirror above the fireplace, Jake saw it, a shadow, watching him. It smiled. Back at the sheriff's house, Emily sat by, the window watching the moon rise. Then something outside caught her eye. A man. Walking down the center of Stillwater's main road, calm as a ghost. It was him. The preacher. She felt it in her bones. He didn't knock when he reached the house. He just stood there, staring up at her window. Then slowly, he raised one hand and pointed at her. Emily gasped, backed away. By the time Amos ran into the room, the street was empty. No sign of anyone. But the floorboards beneath her feet were warm, like someone had just been standing there, with fire still in their veins. The next morning, the sky over. Stillwater was a shade too red. Sheriff Amos stood outside his house, shotgun in hand, scanning the street. But there was no sign of the preacher, no tracks, no proof he was even there, except the wood on the porch was scorched, just enough to know it wasn't a dream. Inside, Emily was silent. Her eyes locked on the locket again, fingers tracing its edge. Did Mama ever meet him? She asked. Amos turned, slow. No. I kept her far from it. But she knew something was wrong. Before she died, she warned me. Said evil don't always wear a monster's face. Emily nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. He said I belonged to the fire. Amos's stomach turned. He said that to you? Emily looked up, haunted. In my dreams, every night. At the edge of town, Jake sat by the preacher's old book, flipping pages. The writing shifted, sometimes English, sometimes something else entirely. There were diagrams, rituals, a twisted version of scripture all tied to one symbol, the mark, and always beside that symbol, a sketch, a girl with long hair, eyes closed, a flame over her heart. Jake didn't know much about magic, but he knew enough to tell when a man wasn't just a lunatic, but a believer, and believers were dangerous. Suddenly, a knock at the door. Jake drew his pistol, opened it just enough to see old Clara May, the town's former midwife. Her eyes were wide with fear. He's back, Jake, she rasped. I saw him last night by the well, preachin' to the wind like he never left. Said the harvest moon was coming, and she'd be his flame reborn. Jake stepped outside, heart thundering. The harvest moon? Clara nodded. It's tonight. Back in Stillwater's graveyard, the ground trembled. One by one, the headstones cracked. Not from any quake, but from something rising beneath. And behind the church, just outside the broken fence, stood the preacher, Elijah Black. His long coat flared in the wind, and his fingers dripped with ash. He whispered words in an ancient tongue, eyes glowing, faintly in the dusk. Then he opened his palm, revealing the same spiral burn mark as Emily's. He pressed it to the earth, and from the soil came a whisper. Soft, young. Father? Elijah smiled. It's almost time, my child." Emily couldn't breathe. The mark on her arm pulsed with a heat she couldn't explain. It felt like something inside her was waking up, something old and angry. She stood in front of her mirror, eyes wide, watching the scar glow faintly in the candlelight. And then she heard it. A whisper. Not in her ears, but inside her. "Come to me, flame-born." She stumbled back. The mirror cracked. Jake rode fast. He didn't stop for the sheriff. Didn't stop for the preacher's book. There was only one person left in Stillwater who knew more about the church fire than anyone else alive. Old Jonas Wilkes, the undertaker. He lived in the hills now, away from town. Folks said he'd gone mad. Jake didn't care. Madmen knew the truth better than most preachers ever dared admit. Jonas answered the door in a nightshirt and long coat, eyes glassy with whiskey. Or memories. "You brought the fire back with..." "You, didn't you, boy?" Jake pushed in. "I need answers. Now." Jonas didn't argue. He walked to a trunk in the corner, rusted and thick with dust. Opened it. Inside lay a bundle of charred cloth, a cracked Bible, and a scorched wedding veil. She wasn't alone in that fire, Jonas whispered. She was buried with someone else. Jake stared. "What?" Jonas nodded. "We found 2 bodies. One burned beyond recognition. But the preacher told us not to question it. Said the Lord took 2, but one would return." Jake's blood ran cold. "You're telling me the preacher buried someone else in Emily's grave?" Jonas looked up, eyes hollow. "No, son. I'm telling you he buried her twin." Back in town, Emily ran. The whispers in her head had turned to voices now, layered, overlapping, some crying, some chanting. They were calling her to the church. She knew she shouldn't go. She also knew she didn't have a choice. The door to the old church swung open before she touched it. Inside, it looked different now, rebuilt somehow in ways that defied reason. The altar glowed with candlelight, though no one had lit them, and at the center stood Elijah Black. Waiting. He didn't smile this time. He just said one word. "Welcome home." The air inside the church was thick, not just with dust, but with something older, heavier. Emily stepped forward slowly. The preacher didn't move. He just watched her, eyes glowing faintly in the flickering candlelight. "Elijah," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "What do you want from me?" He tilted his head. "It's not what I want, child. It's what you were born for." She clenched her fists. "You're lying. My father told me everything. About the fire. About you." Elijah stepped down from the altar. "The sheriff lied to protect you. He buried your twin so no one would know the truth." Emily's breath caught. "She was marked, like you. But too weak. You survived because the fire accepted you." "No," Emily whispered. "That's not true." But deep down, she wasn't sure anymore. Meanwhile, Jake thundered down the main road, dirt kicking up behind his horse like a storm. He was headed straight to the sheriff's house. Amos met him on the porch, shotgun in hand. "She's gone," Jake said before Amos could speak. "She's with him." Amos's face hardened. "I knew this day would come." Jake grabbed his arm. "Why didn't you tell her about the twin?" Amos looked away. "Because I held her burned body in my arms, Jake. I couldn't let Emily grow up knowing she was a shadow of something lost. I had to give her a clean start." "She deserves the truth now," Jake said. "He's not just some preacher. He's trying to complete something, a ritual he started years ago." Amos nodded slowly. "Then we finish it. Tonight." Back, at the church, Elijah extended his hand. "Let me show you," he whispered. Against her better judgment, Emily stepped closer, and the church changed. The walls melted into ash. The floor glowed like coals. She was no longer in Stillwater, but in some other place, a place of fire, smoke, and memories. She saw it all, her mother screaming, the church burning, 2 babies, one crying, one silent. And Elijah, holding the silent one, whispering words into her ear. Then the image vanished, and Emily was back in the church, trembling. Elijah's voice broke the silence. The mark chose you. You are the flame reborn. And tonight, under the harvest moon, your true self will awaken. Emily took a shaky breath, then whispered, I'd rather burn with the truth than live under your lies. Elijah's eyes narrowed. So, be it. The moon rose red over still water, blood red. Jake and Sheriff Amos stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, the church glowing faintly below like a lantern in the dark. Got enough shells? Jake asked, loading his revolver. Got enough regrets, Amos muttered. Let's make sure Emily doesn't become one of them. They kicked their horses forward, hooves pounding against the dry ground like war drums. Each second counted now. Below, the preacher had begun the ritual. Inside the church, the candles floated mid-air. The floor had become a circle of ash, symbols, etched deep into the wood, glowing with ember-red light. Emily stood at the center, arms trembling, breath shallow. Elijah circled her, chanting in a forgotten tongue. You feel it, don't you? He hissed. The power waking in your blood? I feel rage, she snapped. And sorrow. He smiled. Good. That means it's working. Suddenly, boom, the front doors of the church blew open. Jake burst in, pistol raised. Step away from her. Elijah didn't flinch. Ah, the outlaw returns. Jake took a step closer. You want power? Try facing someone who's got nothing to lose. Emily looked up, her eyes wide with relief. And something else. The mark on her arm flared, brighter than before. Jake, she whispered. It's burning. Amos followed behind, aiming his shotgun at the preacher's chest. You've taken enough from this town, Elijah. Time to end this. But Elijah just laughed. You think bullets will stop this? I am the flame now. With a flick of his hand, the candles roared to life, fire licking up the walls. The floor cracked, and a deep pulsing hum filled the air. Then, the preacher's skin began to change. It darkened, cracked like coal, glowing from beneath. Jake fired once. The bullet hit Elijah square in the chest. And stopped, floating. Too late, Elijah hissed. She is mine now, Emily screamed, collapsing to her knees. The mark on her arm exploded with heat, and a ring of fire surrounded her. Jake rushed forward, but the flames threw him back. Emily! But she didn't hear him. Her eyes were glowing now. Something was rising inside her, something that didn't want to be stopped. Emily floated, not on air, but on flame. Her feet no longer touched the ground. The fire circle around her pulsed like a heartbeat, and her eyes burned with the light of something ancient. Jake watched helplessly, sprawled across the floor. Emily, you have to fight it. But she didn't answer, because she wasn't just Emily anymore. Elijah stepped toward her, eyes wide with awe. Yes, just like her. Like Ember. That name struck a chord in the flames. Suddenly, Emily gasped. What? Did you call me? Elijah smiled. Your true name, the one you were born with. You were never just Emily. You are Ember, the twin reborn, the chosen flame. Memories surged through her mind like wildfire, flashes of another girl, a twin, her own face but different, weaker, fragile, and then the fire. I remember her, she whispered. She was crying. Elijah nodded. And you survived. Because you were always meant to. But I didn't want this, she cried. You don't get to choose destiny, Elijah said. You fulfill it. Amos, shielding his face from the flames, shouted to Jake. She's still in there. Talk. To her. Jake struggled to his feet. Emily, or Ember, whatever you are, listen to me. Her head turned slowly, fire crackling in her hair. You don't have to be what he made you. You don't owe this town anything. You don't owe him anything. But you're not alone. Tears, made of smoke, slid down her burning cheeks. Jake stepped forward, flames licking at his boots. You saved me once, remember? When I was bleeding in that canyon. You believed in me. Let me believe in you now. Her voice shook. I'm afraid I'll hurt you. He smiled gently. Then hurt me. But don't become him. The fire around her flared high. Elijah growled, stepping between them. She is mine now. Jake didn't blink. Then take your shot, preacher. Elijah raised both hands, and the church shook with a thunderous roar. But Emily's voice cut through the storm. No. She lifted her hand, and the fire obeyed her. With one motion, she turned the flames, not outward, but inward, pulling them into herself like a collapsing sun. Elijah screamed as the fire left him. He stumbled backward, skin cracking, voice turning to ash. And then silence. He was gone. Only embers remained. Emily fell to her knees. Jake caught her. Her body was hot but cooling fast. Her eyes returned to normal. I didn't become him, she whispered. Jake smiled. No. You became you. 3 days had passed since the fire. The church was gone. Again, reduced to smoldering ash and blackened beams, just like 15 years ago. But this time no one died. At least, not anyone that mattered. Emily sat on the back porch of the sheriff's house, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Jake brought her coffee, still steaming. Town's talking, he said softly. Some folks think it was a miracle. Emily gave a weak smile. And others? They think you're cursed. She sipped the coffee, the heat grounding her. Maybe they're right. Jake sat beside her. You don't feel cursed to me. She looked at him, eyes tired but clear. What about you, Jake? You saw what I did, what I became. He shrugged. I've seen worse, rode with worse. But you've never loved worse. That silenced him. The silence stretched until the wind rustled the dried cornfields. Then Emily said, He called me Ember. Jake nodded. He thought you were your sister. I think I was for a second. She glanced at her arm. The mark was still there, but now it looked faded, like an old burn scar, not glowing anymore. But I remembered something while the fire was inside me, she added. A voice, not his, a woman's, my mother's. Jake turned to her. She said, One will burn, one will bind. Emily's hands trembled slightly. I think the fire chose me, but the binding, that was her. Ember was meant to die. I was meant to carry it. Jake leaned forward. Then maybe the curse is broken? Emily didn't answer, because deep inside, she felt something stirring, a faint heat, not evil, but awake. Later that night, Sheriff Amos stood alone at the ruins of the church, lantern in hand. He kicked aside a piece of collapsed timber slice and froze. Something gleamed in the ash. He bent down slowly and picked it up. It was a ring, charred black but with a red stone that shimmered like it was alive. His hands trembled. Behind him, a cold. Wind blew through the trees, and though the night was still, he turned, but no one was there. Still, he felt watched. Back at the house, Emily sat by the window, unable to sleep. She touched the scar on her arm. It pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Sheriff Amos couldn't sleep. The ring sat on his desk, wrapped in a torn cloth. But even through layers, he could feel the heat, like it was breathing. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, hands shaking. His mind replayed the preacher's last moments. The way Elijah turned to ash. Too fast. Too easy. Amos had buried too many men to believe death ever came easy to monsters. And this one didn't scream. He just vanished. Jake found Emily in the barn the next morning brushing down her horse. "You slept at all?" he asked. "Didn't try," she replied. Jake held out a folded note. "This came for you," Emily raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "No name. Just left on the porch." She unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, too perfect. "Ashes fall where fire failed. The red moon is only the first. Your mark is not the end. It is the key. Come to the canyon, alone, midnight." Emily's stomach sank. She looked at Jake. "Do you think he's alive?" Jake hesitated. "I think something survived. Whether it's him or what he served, I don't know." That night, Amos stood outside the sheriff's office staring up at the sky. No clouds, no stars, just a strange, dim glow at the horizon. Not natural. He lit a cigar and muttered, "I should have burned that church myself 15 years ago." Inside his coat pocket, the ring pulsed. He didn't know it yet, but a crack had formed in the redstone, and something inside it had opened its eyes. Meanwhile, Emily saddled her horse. Jake watched her from the stable doors, arms folded. "You're really going, aren't you?" "I have to," she said. "Whoever sent that note knows things I need to understand." Jake stepped forward. "Then I'm coming with you." Emily shook her head. "It said alone. If this is about me, I need to face it." Jake's jaw clenched. "You don't have to prove anything, Emily." She looked back, her voice soft. "I'm not proving anything. I'm finding out who I really am." Then she rode off into the dark, toward the canyon, toward the truth. The canyon was dead silent. No crickets, no wind, just the sound of hooves echoing off the rock walls as Emily rode deeper into the redstone labyrinth. The moon was hidden behind clouds, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. She dismounted, where the note said midnight. She stood alone, the scar on her arm tingling, not burning, but pulling, like it recognized the place. "All right," she called into the darkness. "I'm here. What do you want?" At first, nothing. Then, "Oh," whisper soft female. "You came back." Emily froze. "Who's there?" The air shimmered near the canyon wall, and then a figure stepped forward. A girl. Same age, same face. But where Emily was flesh and bone, this girl looked like flickering smoke and glowing embers. Emily staggered back. "No, you're not real." "I'm what's left," the girl said softly. "The part of me burned away, trapped in the flame, until you woke it." Emily shook her head. "I saw you die." "You saw a body burn," Ember replied, "but fire doesn't destroy everything. Some things, it preserves." Back in Stillwater, Jake stood on the sheriff's porch, restless. "I should have followed her," he muttered. Inside, Sheriff Amos was staring at the ring again. The crack had grown. Now, tiny red symbols pulsed inside the stone. "Jake," Amos said slowly. "Do you know what Elijah was before he came here?" Jake frowned. "A preacher?" Amos shook his head. "No. Before that, he was a scribe of something older than the church, something they erased." Jake's eyes narrowed. "What kind of scribe?" Amos picked up an old leather book from the drawer, burned, brittle, and bound in strange hide. The kind that doesn't write in ink. Back in the canyon, Ember stepped closer. "You think you saved the town, but you just opened the door." Emily's voice trembled. "What door?" Ember raised her hand and pointed to the canyon floor, where cracks in the rock formed a perfect circle. "A seal. Mother bound the fire inside me, to keep them out." "You shattered that when you let it in." Emily whispered, "What did I unleash?" Ember's eyes glowed bright red. "They are coming." Then she vanished into ash. Behind Emily, the ground began to rumble. The ground split open beneath Emily's boots. She leapt back as a low howl echoed from the canyon floor, like wind trapped inside a bottle the size of a mountain. From the circle of cracks, something rose. It wasn't a creature. It was a shadow, long, liquid, writhing, like smoke and oil fused into one. No eyes, no face. But it moved like it knew her. Emily froze, heart thundering. Her mark glowed faintly again, the same dull red it had during the church fire. The shadow pulsed. "You bear the ember. You broke the seal. Now. We come." Emily stumbled back. "No, I didn't mean to." The voice inside her head hissed again. "Intent is for the innocent. You are chosen." Meanwhile, in Stillwater, Sheriff Amos flipped through the scorched book by lantern light. Jake stood beside him, tense. "This ain't Latin," Jake muttered. "No, it's older," Amos said, pointing at a symbol, same one engraved inside the cracked ring. "The mark of Ember. The cult that raised Elijah worshipped something, buried in the earth. Not hell, but beneath it." Jake leaned in. "And Emily carries that mark." Amos nodded grimly. "She's the key. Not just to release it, but maybe to stop it." Jake grabbed his rifle. "Then I'm going after her." Amos grabbed his arm. "You'll die in that canyon. You don't have the fire." Jake pulled away. "Maybe not, but I've got her. And I ain't letting her face this alone." Back in the canyon, Emily dropped to her knees as the shadow loomed. It began to stretch, tendrils licking the canyon walls, blackening stone, freezing air. Then, it stopped. From the air beside her, Ember's voice whispered again. "You can still bind it, but not with fire, with choice." Emily looked up. "What does that mean?" No answer, only the wind, only the rumbling earth beneath her. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. The shadow flinched. Emily turned to see Jake on the ridge above, rifle smoking. He shouted, "Get on the horse!" She didn't move. The shadow twisted toward Jake's voice. It roared, a sound like 10,000 burning lungs. Emily stood, eyes locked on the seal. Then she whispered, "I know what I have to do." And she stepped into the center of the circle. Emily stood at the center of the ancient seal. The ground around her cracked and glowed like veins of molten rock. The shadow creature pulsed above her, hungry, watching. Jake shouted again from the ridge, "Emily, don't! Get out of there!" But Emily's eyes were locked on the mark on her arm, now glowing as bright as the sun, and in her heart, something clicked. A memory. Her mother's voice. "One will burn, one will bind." Ember. Burned Emily. Would bind. She dropped to her knees and pressed her hand to the stone. The mark flared, sending a wave of searing light across the canyon. The shadow screamed, not in pain, but in resistance. It recoiled, tendrils flailing. But it couldn't escape. The seal had awakened, and Emily spoke, calm and clear. "You're not taking anyone else. I carry you now. You stay with me." The light swallowed her whole. Jake watched in horror as the canyon floor erupted in blinding red-white light. Then, silence. No more shadow. No more glow. Just dust. He ran down the canyon, coughing through smoke, calling her name. "Emily! Emily!" But she was gone. 1 week later, Stillwater, the town rebuilt quietly. The sheriff's office posted no official statement. Most folks said the fire in the canyon was just a flare-up from dry weather. No one really wanted the truth, but Jake knew. Every night he lit a lantern and placed it on the porch, just in case. 6 months later, winter had arrived. Snow dusted the plains. Jake sat alone in the church, now rebuilt again, when the back doors creaked open. He turned and froze. Emily stood there, hair longer, eyes deeper, a faint glow still beneath her skin, but she smiled. "Miss me?" Jake stood, heart racing. How? She walked forward slowly. I bound it, deep. But I had to stay. Somewhere else for a while. Learn to hold it. Be its keeper. He swallowed. Are you still you? She stepped close and touched his face. More than ever. Outside, the wind howled, but the fire was quiet, and in Stillwater, peace returned. For now.